All right, so we're going to do a Q&A with Mr. Foss here. So we're entering into, well, actually, have we gone through the winter solstice? We have gone through the winter solstice, haven't we? Are we in winter now?
Not
No,
yet,
we're not in winter. So we're still in fall, but winter is rapidly approaching, right? So I know we've got the time change coming up here shortly. So how can I effectively winterize my plumbing system to prevent frozen pipes and water damage?
That is a great question.
I thought so. Thank you, Rosalie, for getting us all this content.
So I would say the number one thing I've seen, and I've actually seen this cause the damage, is hoses that are still connected to the hose bibs outside with water in them, because oftentimes you leave your little spray handle on the end of it and you have water in it, and you've turned it off at the house, but you didn't take the hose off, and that water in that hose freezes a lot easier because it's totally exposed to the elements, and then that frozen water follows back into the house and oftentimes can cause some of the copper or whatever else just inside that wall to freeze and split and crack inside the wall. So the thing I always do is,
if you leave the hose bib on and using the nozzle as your valve, right, and then so it's still got water, so under pressure, and so it's freezing at the hose, and then it creeps back into the plumbing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing, though. I've had people do that, and they still turned it off at the hose bib, but there's still water on both ends of that hose bib, and it still freezes through. So the thing to do is during the before winter, fall, late fall, take your hoses off of the house, disconnect them. And they also make those little foam things that go on the hose bib to help protect it, to keep it from freezing. That's a good thing to do. Another good thing is obvious, just insulate your piping, even under the house and outside the house especially.
Yeah, if you got any pipes outside the house, definitely.
Wrap that insulation with 10 mil tape. Yeah. Because the UV rays can ruin the insulation, then you're just having to do it again. So wrap that insulation with the 10 mil tape to help protect it from the UV rays.
So if it's exposed to the sun, you definitely want to wrap it, because we see it all the time where it's not wrapped and it kind of melts.
Yep.
It looks like it's melting, and it's not the heat that's doing it. It's just the UV breaks down the styrofoam and destroys it.
Yep. So protect, and the other nice thing about actually insulating your lines, especially on the inside, especially on the hot water side, it's actually going to save you some energy usage on your water heater. So not only are you protecting it from the elements, but you're also helping keep that hot water hot inside your hot water line, so that way you aren't wasting as much energy trying to heat up water to get it from point A to point B.
And that's actually code these days. So it's required for us to insulate all the pipes, all the hot water underneath the house. I don't think it's code for cold water lines yet, is it? It just depends on the elevation, if I remember correctly. But I know a lot of times...
It's still not a bad idea.
A lot of times we will present that as an option to our customers if they want us to insulate the cold water lines as well, because it's not a bad idea. Because every once in a while you get that, about every 7 to 10 years up here, we get that really hard freeze, and kind of like what happens when we get that really hot spell. There are not enough plumbers to make it to all the calls when that happens, and we'll have we're just going out and doing triage. We'll go out and fix a leak, just do the bare minimum so we can get the water on, and then move on to the next. And then also there's economy of scale, so if we could spend more time on the house, we could do more work, and it'll be cheaper. And also, you're going to be more than likely spending a little bit of a premium when there's not enough workers to do the work, and all of a sudden there's an emergency like this. So if you can do everything you can to make sure, make sure that you take care of these things, it's not a bad idea. Any other kind of things for? Well, let's move on to. Okay, go
actually,
ahead.
The other thing that you can do. Let's say you brought up a great example. You have a deep freeze is coming.
Yeah.
And you've done everything you can for the piping. One other thing that you can do, especially going through that night, is leave the furthest fixture on just a trickle.
Yeah.
And what that does is moving water has a harder time freezing.
Right.
And so it just helps keep the water moving in the pipe, which will help keep that type of thing from happening. Right. So on those deep freeze nights, it's not a bad idea to do that.
And so those of you
just a trickle.
Those of you that live in Nevada County, you can see that, right? Like when you see a stream or a river, it rarely freezes, right? And you'll get a little bit of an edge where the water's still, and that'll freeze. But on ponds and things, it'll freeze over. So it's the same thing. It's just as water sits, it has a chance for those ice crystals to form and go together and form ice. Whereas if you just keep a little trickle, it doesn't take much. I mean, like a drip every couple seconds is enough movement to keep it from freezing. So, and we've gotten pretty good with forecasting to be able to tell you it's going to be a 20-degree night. And that's kind of a weird thing too, is like, water freezes at 32 degrees, but a 32-degree night isn't necessarily going to freeze the water, because it's got to be pretty darn cold for it to freeze through the pipe, because the pipe's kind of insulated itself, just being that there's a pipe. And then if it's inside the house, it's going to take even colder. But when it's really cold, we've seen pipes freeze in garages that are unconditioned garages, underneath houses that are unconditioned,
or homes that are left,
vacant,
and are left vacant. So if you do leave your house vacant for, let's say you're going on vacation or whatever else during the winter, please leave your heater and set it at 50 degrees or so,
or 48,
just to keep the inside of the house warm enough to help keep those pipes from freezing, because it's far better than the cost to pay for that heat is a lot cheaper than, and then having to repair your house because of a water leak
100 times
when
cheaper.
You weren't there.
Yeah. I know, like when I first started the company back in 2001, we had a bad freeze that year. And I remember working on a house on Broad Street in Nevada City, and the toilet bowl froze. It got so cold in that place because they didn't have the heat on. It got so cold that it froze the water in the toilet bowl. And they're like, "Can you do anything for me?" I'm like, "You just got to wait till it thaws out, and then call me if there's a leak." And you get those calls like, "I have no water. What do I do?" You got to wait until the water thaws, and then we'll figure out if you got a leak. Don't wait till it gets to that point. Don't wait. A couple other things you can do to avoid it too is leave the heat on. At least you want to keep it just above freezing. So if you can keep it above 32 degrees, you're good, right? So it doesn't even have to be really conditioned that much, just hot enough that it stays warm. And if you've got a garage that doesn't have any heaters or anything like that, even just a couple light bulbs, incandescent light bulbs, will keep a pretty big space warm, or a space heater or something like that in the garage. You want to keep the garage a little warm too, because we've seen a lot of garage line or water lines in garages burst when it's 20 degrees for a couple of days. And that's generally what we're speaking about. So like if it's going to be really cold, when we got a couple of days of 20 degrees, you want to be really diligent in going through your entire house and thinking of your entire house and think of any possibility where there's an unconditioned space where I can potentially freeze. Underneath the house, we've seen when we hit those low temperatures, I've seen water lines freeze underneath homes just because of the vents. It gets warm enough down there. If you can just keep it above freezing by some incandescent light bulbs, you're good. Those are good. All right, how do I avoid a frozen irrigation system?
The best thing to do is have it designed well, so that way you can turn the system off and then drain it down. So it has a drain down valve at the low end of the system to be able to turn it off, allow air into the system to be able to drain down the system. So if that's ever something that you're wanting to have done, that's something that you can always give us a call and have us look at your system and let you know the best way to do this, or if there's something more that needs to be done to make it more winter friendly. The worst thing you can do is leave the system pressurized. So you want to be able to turn that system off and open everything up as best you can. So that way, if water does freeze, it kind of has some place to go. It's not trapped inside the pipe, causing the pipe to freeze and have any other issues.
Yeah. So what he's talking about is literally putting a valve on any of the irrigation lines back at its source. So if you can get a valve installed somewhere in a conditioned space, ideally, a worst case scenario at least inside the well house, so that you can isolate those lines so they don't freeze. And generally speaking about PVC, so that's kind of like one of those things where, if you're comfortable enough to do it yourself, it's a relatively easy job because you're just dealing with plastic pipe and it's glue and primer and glue rather. Clean those fittings really good, sand them, prime it, glue it. You're pretty good. I know I kind of go overboard with anything over 3/4 of an inch. I will literally use emery cloth and clean the fittings. 1/2 inch, I'm Yeah, you're pretty solid if you just make sure to use the primer and glue, but make sure you use the primer. But having that valve could potentially save you thousands of dollars. And that's the thing too to remember. Like, water damage when it happens fast. And if you can imagine, a half-inch line can produce anywhere from 6 to 10 gallons per minute out of a whole open half-inch line. So if a line breaks, you can get 6 to 10 gallons per minute coming out of that. If you've ever dropped a gallon of milk on the floor and seen what size of a puddle that happens, imagine that 6 to 10 folds every single minute. And if it takes you more than 5 minutes to go shut the water off, now you're talking about 100 gallons, right? So you're talking about you're talking about a bathtub worth of water that's working its way through your house. So it can happen. When it happens fast. So if you can do anything you can do to avoid that, you're going to be a lot better off.
Yep.
We got time for maybe one more. What should I do about my well system?
Well systems. Well, first of all, make sure it's well insulated. No pun intended on that one. You do want to make sure it's insulated. The other thing that you can do is oftentimes in a well house, you could have a outlet.
Yeah.
And you could put in a heat lamp or a space heater, those type of things in the well house to be able to do that. If you don't, you might want to get an electrician out there to see if there's a way they can hook one up for you.
Yeah.
But you want to have, try to have some type of a heat source, and like I said, a heat lamp or
even an incandescent light bulb.
Yeah.
An LED. One of the reasons why they're so efficient is because they don't form heat. That's why they used 1/10 of what an incandescent light bulb uses. But if you remember back in the day with easy bake ovens, right? We used incandescent light bulbs in an easy bake oven. It forms a lot of heat. That's why they're so inefficient. But they work really good at keeping that space heated. Because again, all we're trying to do is keeping it above freezing, right? So an incandescent light bulb in a well house will work. Another thing you can do is using heat tape that you can get in any hardware store. And it's really easy to install. You literally just wrap it around there and put some duct tape on it. And they use a very little bit of electricity. And the thing to think about too is it really depends on where you live. And this is something that we see all the time. It's like, if I'm on top of a hill, if I'm on top of a knoll, I have a less likely chance of freezing compared to if I'm in a valley. Mm-hmm. So if I'm in a basin, right, all that cold air is going to sink into that basin. And you can kind of feel that if you go out there and walk or hike in areas where, you're hiking through the forest and all of a sudden you get into a low spot and it's like 10 to 20 degrees cooler than when you're up high. If you live in one of those areas, really be concerned about it. I know I live in that kind of an area. I live in a lull in Grass Valley, and I'm pretty conservative about making sure everything doesn't freeze. When I lived on top of Banner Mountain at a higher elevation at 3,400 feet, I had less likely chance of freezing than I did now that I live in town because of that fact that I'm in a depression. So it really depends on where you live too. So those are a couple things. We got actually, let's cut it off. All right. So I'm getting the cut it off from my producer. We got to knock it off. So if you need any plumbing, electrical, heating, or air help, you can reach us at 530-230-9092. That number again, 530-230-9092. You can find us on the web at easyasabt.com or abtplumbing.com. You can like us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and now we just launched on TikTok. So all you Gen Zers out there, and maybe a few millennials that might be listening, we'll have some stuff up on TikTok here shortly. And then go.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone of the cool specials we have right now. Andrew, yes. What are those? Do you remember what they are?
Cool specials we have. So we have some ridiculously prices. So Dan heads up our drain cleaning division, $97 drain cleaning on any residential, primary residence, drain, sewage pipe, drain pipe. We clear it or it's free, $97. You can't beat that. $49 AC furnace tune-up. If you have not had your system checked out, definitely have it checked out because we're starting to turn the furnaces on now, and you want to make sure you don't have a cracked heat exchanger. You want to make sure that thing's not dangerous. We also flush a water heater and do a thorough plumbing inspection for $49 and electrical inspection. If you haven't had your electrical system inspected in the last 20 years, like most of us haven't, you should really have it checked out. Electrical wears out, and then nasty things happen like fires and stuff. So for $49, we'll come out and check it and make sure it's safe. And with that, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.